Hey guys, welcome back. So in this lecture we would be talking about how to download and install kops. So download the kops binary with the following cur1 command, as you can see in the screen. The command should be issued on one line and have no backslashes in it. It also has the version of the kops tool embedded in the URL. You can change this. You can see https github.com/kubernetes/kops/releases for the latest version, as you can see in the screen here. Here. Step number 2 is make the downloadable binary executable, as you can see here. Step number 3, move it to directory in your path, which you can see here. And step number 4 is run a kops version command to verify the installation, as you can see here. Now we will talk about how to install and configure the AWS CLI, and for that I'm just moving to the next screen. So the example here shows how to install the AWS CLI from the default app repos used by Ubuntu 16.04. The installation method will obviously be different if you are using a different Linux distro. Steps include 1. Run the following command to install the AWS CLI, as you can see in the screen. Step number 2 is run the AWS configure command to configure your instance of the AWS CLI. You will need the credentials of an AWS IAM account with Amazon EC2 full access, Amazon Route 53 full access, Amazon S3 full access, IAM full access, and Amazon VPC full access to complete this step. This you can see here, step number 3, or where I am pointing through my cursor. Step number 3 is to create a new S3 bucket for kops to share config and state information. The domain name you use in the example below will be different if you are following along. The cluster 1 is the name of the cluster we will create. K8s is the subdomain delegated to AWS. Route 53 and tf1.com is the public domain I have hosted here, with the third party tfi.com is fictional and only being used in these examples to keep the command line argument short, as you can see here. Step number 4 is list your S3 bucket and grep for the name of the bucket you created. This will prove that the bucket created successfully. Of course, this you see here. Again, Step number 5 is tell kops where to find its config and state. This you can see here. Now quickly going to the next screen. Step number 6, as I said, is make your AWS SSH key available to kops. The command below, which you can see here, the top here, will copy the keys in your authorized keys file to a new file in ssh/id-rsa.pub. This is because kops expects to find your AWS SSH key in a file called id_rsa.pub in your profile's hidden SSH directory. Step number 7 is create a new cluster with the following kops create cluster command, as you can see here. The command is broken down as follows. Kops create cluster tells kops to create a new cluster. Cloud is equal to AWS tell kops to create this cluster in AWS using the AWS provider. Zones is equal to EU-West-1B tells kops to create cluster in the EU West 1B zone. We tell it to use the delegated zone with the DNS-zone is equal to k8s.tfi.com flag. We name the cluster with the name flag, and the yes flag tells kops to go ahead and deploy the cluster. If you omit the yes flag, a cluster config will be created, but it will not be deployed. It may take a few minutes for the cluster to deploy. This is because kops is doing all the hard work creating the AWS resource required to build this cluster. This includes things like VPC, EC2 instances, launch configs, auto-scaling groups, security groups, etc. After it has built the AWS infrastructure, it also has to build the Kubernetes cluster. Coming on to the next step, which is step number 8. Once the cluster is deployed, you can validate it with the kops validate cluster command, which you can see here. Here you will get to know the instance groups and a node status. So by now you know now how to create a Kubernetes cluster in AWS using the kops tool. Now that your cluster is up and running, you can issue kubect1 commands against it. It might also be worth having a poke around in the AWS console to see some of the resources that kops created. So I'm taking a pause here, and we will start with the new lecture soon. Thank you.